Welcome back to the program. Well, we're watching the Middle East go up in flames as country after country continues its protests. Initially, that didn't affect the U.S. that much, but now it's coming home because we're getting sucked in like a quagmire, like a tar baby getting sucked down into the quicksand. This is a big mess, and unfortunately, there's no easy way out. You know, I enjoy literature. I've got a degree in English literature, and one of my favorite poets is a guy named Rudyard Kipling. I studied him when I went to school over in England some years back. Remember this great poem of Kipling's? "Oh, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet, till earth and sky stand presently at God's great judgment seat." What he was saying was that 2,000 years of history, there's been effort after effort by various countries to invade the Middle East, to control the Middle East. You got the Egyptians, the Turks, the Jews, the Romans, the Arabs now, involving Europeans coming in. And of course, America's entanglement. America's been involved for 60, 70 years because of one thing: oil. That's why we got in there initially, because of all the oil. And so now we're bogged down, and this thing continues to grow dramatically. Remember, one of my favorite movies was a Sean Connery, Michael Caine movie called The Man Who Would Be King. And these two guys go off, and one of them is looked on to be the king, into the Middle East, into a country that is east of the Suez, who knows where. And Michael Caine ends up being the only one alive. They kill Sean Connery. And he's told, "You are free to take the message back to the West that you should quit trying to convert and save us in the Middle East. This is our country, get out." Pretty good message then, pretty good message now. And so we've controlled for the past 60 years by doing one thing: supporting these dictatorships. Our attitude was that if a dictator was favorable towards America, didn't go outside their boundaries, didn't mess with Israel, kept our alliances where they were pro-West and not so much in support of the Russians, and we would pour billions of dollars into their coffers, then we didn't care what they did within the element of their own country. If there was torture, if there was mayhem, if people were killed, well, just contain it. And we just kind of looked the other way. And so here's the irony here now. You see, what we're now trying to say, our ambassadors and the poor guy in Libya that was killed here last week, our ambassadors are making the case that, look, we're glad the Arab Spring took place. We're glad that democracy is coming to the Middle East. And they look at us and say, "Are you kidding? Give me a break. For 60 years, you poured billions of dollars into the dictatorships that tortured and abused us, and now you're telling us everything is fine, you're all for our activities right now? Look, you don't know what you're talking about. You're here for our oil, get on out, and we want to be left alone in our own country." Look at, what was that? Think of going back to 1776. We were occupied by so many years by the British. We wanted them out. We wanted our country. And so we fought a valiant war, and we carried on some very strong activity ourselves in killing and maiming and trying to get rid of the British. Well, that's what they're doing here to us right now. I don't see why we can't learn this lesson. And then, of course, last week, what happens? We got this guy from Southern California, some nut job, who produces this cheesy movie that's no better than some high school play. And he produced this movie that goes on YouTube several months ago for about 15 minutes. That's supposed to start the whole war in the Middle East, right? Nothing to do with our drones going into the Middle East. Now look, I want to get rid of the bad guys, and there are lots of bad guys over there who have killed Americans, and we should wipe out. But do you know how we do it? We don't go and take them out in the old days where you'd pay off the other side or you'd go in and sneak in and kill them. We send in these drones, and it's very convenient because doesn't put American lives in jeopardy. And we kill bad guys. But while we're killing bad guys, we're also killing 200 or 300 civilians, men, women, and children who are innocent bystanders. And this doesn't sit well with the locals, just like it wouldn't sit well with you if that was happening in America today. It just isn't working. It hasn't worked in the past. It's not going to work now. And by the way, read an interesting article by Dr. Paul Roberts. He's a very famous children's author, wrote in a publication called Trends in Journalism. Here's what he says, and he's being sarcastic when he says this. He's saying, "Washington's assaults on 7 countries have blown up weddings, funerals, kids' soccer games, farmhouses, hospitals, aid workers, schools, people walking along the street, village elders, but the Muslims don't mind. They understand that the well-meaning Americans who love them and are committed to their human rights are bringing them democracy and women's rights. The million or more dead, maimed, and displaced Muslims are a low price to pay for the liberation by Washington. And then you can imagine the sarcasm there. 6,700 Americans killed in Iraq. Iraq wasn't a problem for us. We made it a false problem to go in to get the oil. Haven't gotten a barrel of oil out of that, by the way. So we've used this B&B method I refer to, which is bribing and bombing. It hasn't worked. It's going to be nothing but a continuous quagmire, and we don't learn from history. Let me go back to Kipling. Here's what he said in a book called Nalanka, a novel that he wrote, and he wrote these lines. And the end of the fight is a tombstone white with the name of the latest deceased. And the epitaph dear, a fool lies here who tried to hustle the East. Message there? Message there? We got to mind our own business. We don't have enough problems here at home. We don't have terrible economic problems here at home, and we're spending billions and billions of dollars in the Middle East trying to change minds that have turned against us because of what we've done in the past. Didn't work then, didn't work now. Need to bring this thing to an end. I'll be right back after this message.